50-55.
Okay, lay down.
That sounds like the name. It's like a Van Halen album title.
It's not even close to 2112 by Rush, so don't even bother.
No, but Eddie Van Halen is a much better musician than any of them.
You didn't just say that.
But are any of his songs as long as a single Rush song?
In case anybody ever asks you, I just want to say the words, The Camera Eye, okay? That was the last song that Rush produced and released that was over 10 minutes in length. That was 1978.
And it still hasn't ended yet. That song is still...
This is Epic Battle Cry Skirmish 224. Quickly becoming bad.
Hello and welcome to Epic Battle Cry. This is the place where we cut through the crap to bring you the real deal in the gaming industry today. I'm your host, Tony Grice, and with me, as always, is Daniel Kaiser and Brent Adams. DK, how are you doing this week, man?
I'm doing great, TG in 3D, but to be honest with you, this recording is taking away from my time to play Titanfall, so let's hurry up!
I know, and let's scrap it. Let's just
scrap it.
You guys are
because
obviously
I'm
playing
preparing
on the
for
Xbox
Titan.
One.
Yes, we are obviously playing on the
Because
Xbox
if you were
One.
playing
We'll
on
talk
the
about
PC,
that.
you wouldn't be nearly this excited.
That's true. No,
Very
I've
true.
been enjoying the beta with you.
That's what I hear.
And just enjoying the beta, and it's as we're recording this, it's going to go away pretty soon. It's already gone by the time that
by
you
the time you're listening,
listen to this. So,
but the game is only like 3 weeks off, basically, or 4 weeks.
That's true.
So I mean, it's not too much longer. We have to wait.
Yeah,
But and by the way, DK, I would like to say a very big thank you for hooking me up. I was waiting on some beta codes and.
Hey, if you thought that
never,
was cool, there's going to be a mech in your driveway come early March. So, spoiler alert. No, I'm just
Really?
kidding. Yeah. No, I'm just going to destroy your house.
Oh, I'll be surprised, I guess. But
A
it doesn't
mech
really seem
for
like...
me, it's like, oh yeah, it's coming for you. But
It's whatever you
thanks
make
to me
of it.
playing Titanfall with you, though, I don't really have to worry. You probably won't be able to hit the house.
That's true.
I'm just kidding. Brent, how you doing this week, man?
What's up, my nomads of napalm, my migrants of mayhem? How art thou?
Nice. Traveling, moving on to different things, different stages of life.
Okay. That's what I was
different
trying to figure
stages of
out.
careers. Perhaps that's what you're talking about. Not.
I was also kind of talking about the idea of going it alone.
Yeah.
Of maybe going solo versus
Oh, okay.
going with a group.
Yes, that's true.
There's also some connotations of that may
Okay.
factor
What does this
into,
have to do with that first-person music game that we're going to talk about?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Which is what that game is going to be.
All right. Well, we have plenty of stories to go through this week, so let's go ahead and run through the gauntlet.
The gauntlet. Gauntlet.
All right, guys, we're here in the gauntlet, and the first bit of news is
Wow.
it's a little sad.
It's a little
Brent, you wanna tell us
shocking.
Brent, you want to tell us a little bit about the future of the developer behind BioShock Infinite?
There is no fucking future. Next story. No. What's going on is Ken Levine has announced that he is basically shuttering Irrational Games as we know it.
Well, they're closing.
They are close. Yeah, I mean, like he's closing that studio.
Yeah.
And he's taking 15 members of the Irrational team with him, and he's gonna bring them into some new, smaller, more entrepreneurial like venture that will still be under the roof over at 2K Games,
Yep.
but will be focused on something else that we don't know a lot about, other than it's going to be a narrative-driven experience that's highly replayable, and that will focus exclusively on content that will be delivered digitally. So basically, what's going on is that the team at Irrational is finishing off the work on the BioShock Infinite DLC Burial at Sea Episode 2, which is slated for release in March, and then after that. They're going to be Irrational is going to be working and trying to support those people and give them access to the studios to work on portfolios and hosting events and things like that to try to help them find work elsewhere in the game industry, and then they're going to close the doors there at Irrational and move on to whatever this next venture is.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one adjective for it. There's a couple of others that I can think of. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it says a lot, speaks volumes. I think we've kind of reached the point where this is now a trend. It's not just these one-off occurrences, but we're seeing in recent years all these very prominent creative people kind of, not shuttering their individual studios exclusively, but kind of shuttering the idea of what it means to be this giant game developer who churns out
Are you thinking
sequels.
about like Molyneux and like 22 Cans, like that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, but also, I mean, like, look at, Ray Mazeika and Greg Zeschuk leaving BioWare, Cliff Bleszinski left Epic.
Yeah, but I mean, like, list anybody that wouldn't want to get away from EA if they had the choice.
Yeah, that's a good point. But
I think Vince and what's the two guys that are behind Tideball? They're probably okay right now.
They're doing okay, but we're seeing more. And I think the combination of seeing the Kickstarter revolution and that these game developers can do things off on their own. Now Ken is going to be doing things internally at Take-Two, as opposed. I think he was pondering kind of going off, but according to his statement,
says. Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, in his statement, he was just kind of, saying that he was convinced that there's no better place to kind of do that than inside the walls there at Take-Two.
Well, it sounds like they had a little bit to do with it. Like, they sort of said, like, hey, that
stay
doesn't,
here.
If that's what you're wanting to do, we support that. That's fine. Why would you not maybe want to do that here? And so It does sound like they at least, it wasn't like they were sort of pushing him out the door.
Listen, Ken, you're a giant ATM machine, and we'd really, really like to keep you in our parking lot.
But is he? Like, that's, I think, the kind of the question. Like, because wasn't there quite a bit of money put into BioShock Infinite? I'm not necessarily sure that it totally paid off for them as big as they maybe hoped for.
I don't necessarily disagree. Like I can't help but wonder if maybe this was just more sort of like a writing on the wall thing. It's like, you know what? Like, this didn't hit quite as big as what we were hoping. Like, maybe we should just stop while we were ahead.
Well, that's what I was sort of saying, though. To me, it was interesting to hear that the company sort of at least seemed to sort of step in and say, well, no, So at first, I did sort of think that could be it. That maybe they were sort of pushing him out the door. But after you kind of hear about it, I don't really think that it probably was.
Well, I will say this. One thing I do love is in these situations how kind of the industry rallies around itself. And
unless you're King.com, but yeah, keep going.
Sure, but other companies kind of coming out and saying like, we are looking for work and very supportive. It is a tight knit family to some degree, and I do love that this industry because of that. But obviously, for all the people who are losing their current positions, we all here wish them nothing but the best and hope that they find an opportunity to have an outlet for their talents and abilities to continue their careers. But it will be interesting to see what happens with Ken Levine in this project and what exactly he's talking about, and will it be as successful or what? But I don't know. It really out of the blue, I was just looking at this picture of the ocean from BioShock when I said out of the blue, which was just like a mind pun for me, but nobody else. But anyway,
Daniel, that happens a lot more than you think.
That's awesome.
Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how this continues to develop, but and also for the future of the BioShock franchise, really interesting now. So
yeah, that's actually, I was going to say, like,
that's going to stay at Take-Two, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're keeping the property, but it does kind of make you wonder, like, what are they going to end up doing with it if the sort of studio behind it? I mean, are they going to want to necessarily?
They'll reboot it. Yeah. They'll reboot it. They'll put a dubstep soundtrack behind it. It'll be, younger and sexier BioShock. I don't know.
I don't know. It seems like it's one of those things I really.
This ain't your big daddy's BioShock.
Waka waka waka.
DK's point to, like, everybody sort of rallying behind it is really cool. You look on Twitter and there's like tons and tons of developers from or guys that are programmers working at other developers that are sort of saying, like, hey, we got spots over here open, we got spots over here, and it's very cool to see, and it kind of gives you that sense that, like, hey, we've seen what you guys are capable of, and we like it, and we'd love to make you part of our team too. So I think it's very cool to see that that the gaming industry really has that going. Oddly enough, to speak to something Brent brought up, I was just looking on King's website, the guys behind Candy Crush Saga, and they don't have any game programming positions open, but a lot of trademark litigation,
a lot of lawyer positions open.
That's weird.
That is strange.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, something else that is pretty interesting is that we are finally getting to see a little bit of gameplay from The Order 1886. DK, How's it looking? What's it looking like so far?
Yeah, this game obviously was announced for the PS4. It's very promising. We've seen some really cool kind of, the aesthetics of the game world and what they want to kind of project, but we haven't really seen any gameplay. We've gotten snippets of gameplay now, finally getting to see it in action and learning a little bit more about this game. Don't call it steampunk. It is
a comeback.
It is NeoVictorian, apparently, coming from Ready at Dawn. Obviously, this studio, this is a really big game for them. Up until this point, they've been responsible for some PSP games, the God of War Chains of Olympus, Ghost of Sparta, and getting Origins Collection onto the PS3, and some other titles. But this is kind of their big coming out party, ready to see what they could do on a PlayStation 4 platform. And the graphics look really impressive. Gameplay-wise, I don't know that I quite saw enough to really make a judgment as to what exactly this game is. But what we did, Assassin's Creed. No.
I mean, did you watch any of the gameplay? It's
I don't know about that.
I don't see that. But I mean, the look of it is very impressive, but we've seen a mix of some QuickTime events that they say they don't want to feel like traditional QuickTime events. I don't quite know what that means, but also
so they showed footage of the QuickTime events that they don't want to seem a lot like, because if you watched them, they look a lot like the QuickTime.
I watched the video that we had on GameTrailers, and it seemed very interesting, but I watched it for 9 minutes and came away like, I still don't know much about this game at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that they live together, and that is cause for making a game, which means, Tony, you and I were roommates at one point, so maybe we could scratch out a PS4 title at some point. But anyway,
let's wait and see how the Order 1886 turns out, and let's see if that's a good idea or not.
No, what did you guys think?
Because I'm not so sure about it at this point.
I mean, it seemed impressive visually, but I still, as far as a quote-unquote reveal, it didn't feel huge to me, although it's not to take away from the potential of the title. I think they're so deep in it that they didn't just throw the gameplay, make us impressed, keep it short and sweet, and move on. What did you guys think of the debut?
I thought that this particular piece of media was fucking worthless. Mm-hmm. I still think that the game looks quite good, and there's maybe there's less than a minute of actual gameplay that you see within this interview, like spliced throughout. Yeah. That's new stuff. Most of it is taken from the debut trailer that we've already seen, which the game director Ru Weerasaria says is
nice.
Says is in game. He reiterates that everything that we saw from that debut trailer is in game.
And we know it's in game, by the way. Quick caveat: we know it's in game because it has so much fog, and this was originally developed for the N64.
So obviously the pedigree is there from that console of greatness. The other thing that he says, which is not so helpful, is when asked the question, how did you guys achieve the game's cinematic look? His response was something about, well, we know each other, and we've lived together, and. Like, you might think that that's the kind of thing that you bring in other people to do, but we did it ourselves because we know each other. And I was really just like waiting for somebody to slap him sober and say, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Well, I mean, I kind of
it did sort of feel like somebody like literally caught him like as he was, coming off of a coffee break and said, "Hey, let's talk about the game." And he's like, I don't even work here.
Like, as he was entering the state of Colorado, somebody was like, "Let's do an interview," and he's like, "Maybe not the best time."
Maybe as he was exiting the state of Colorado. Maybe.
Exactly. But anyway, there were portions of the interview that I thought were less than informative, and I don't know if that's just like maybe he's one of those people that's like really long-winded, and it's difficult to kind of edit his answers into a concise way, and he's not maybe all that media savvy and doesn't understand how to create sound bites with interview answers. But there were parts of this interview that I was clawing at my face going, why won't you just answer the question?
It all started when I was 3.
Yeah, basically. But anyway, having said all that, and me not really finding him to be all that charismatic an interview subject, I found the footage that they showed off does have that same level of quality and that certainly that high fidelity next gen graphic look that we saw previously in the reveal trailer.
Pretty close.
And I maintain a pretty high level of interest in this game. when it supposedly will come out later this year. They did not give it an exact release date, but they do reiterate that it's slated to be released sometime in 2014.
Yes. You half-breed. What do you think, TG?
I don't know. I was actually, slightly let down by the footage. Not to say that like it didn't look okay, but just there's something worries me to a certain degree that we are in, coming into March. This game is supposedly released this year, and I feel like all we really saw was just a realized world of the trailer we saw a few months back. Like, about, I'd say at least half the footage was directly from that demo we saw. The other half was just a little bit of, I mean, just very little. Like, I mean, literally looked like maybe 2 minutes worth of actual gameplay footage within there. And it worries me a hair. I will say, like, the characters, it looks very, very good. They kind of talk about one of the things they sort of mention in there is how they've chosen to go with a 30 frame. Well, he doesn't talk about it in the video, but they sort of talk about some of the other stories come out. They've gone with a 30 frames per second locked versus like a 60 frame per second. A lot of people talk about these things and say, "Oh, well, so is the system not powerful enough to do that?" And they're just saying that they like the look it gives. It gives a little bit more cinematic look, a little bit more like
they have this
a 24 frame
thing they keep talking about. Filmic, and
it does have a certain visual style.
It does panache, but it does it kind of. Not so. This is where I come from. When they say gameplay debut, we had an event. We're going to show this game off to the world. I'm expecting to see like going through the level, what it's like. A couple
of different levels, maybe,
like that Shadow of Mordor, like 8.5 minute gameplay demo we saw like from 2 weeks ago or something.
I don't want too much, but I want to know that it's there. But and at the same, what worries me about what I've seen so far from this is that is it more in the vein of like a more action-oriented Heavy Rain or something like that? Because we keep seeing the same focus on these characters.
They show like them jumping from like to me it looks like you move around the world like you do in a Assassin's Creed Batman style of game, and then when he's doing the like little sequence when they're shooting, I mean it's a standard over-the-shoulder third person. Like it doesn't. The one thing that the game does not look very distinct.
Sequences
like other than it's.
But I get what you're saying, DK. Like you're saying, like in the absence of definitive information, speculation will take hold, and you're just saying like why aren't we just seeing like a few minutes of uninterrupted gameplay, so we can just see for ourselves. Here's what the game looks like. Here's how it controls. Here's some of the game mechanics you'll have.
Yeah. And they're not being very clear about like what type of game it is. There's like all this mystery.
Well, it's NeoVictorian, if you paid attention.
With fog. Get the fog DLC. We'll clear things up.
It's got the supernatural, but not the magical, because those are two different things.
Those are two. And sorry, I don't mean to rip into this.
The more I think about this, the more worried I'm getting. I think I'm with Tony.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It was a little disconcerting, just the amount of time they spent. Frankly, like if the developer had been talking about lots of details about the game, and then we saw just a little tiny bit of footage, I would have felt slightly better about it. Like, hey,
as opposed
we're
to
learning
about
something.
His orgy pit or whatever the fuck they've got going on.
Like we're learning something about the game, but maybe we're not quite ready to show it off just yet. But like it was very lukewarm. Like this is the kind of thing that would have been better just released as like a dev documentary, like on their website. Like if you want to sort of see this, but to kind of push it, which I think they were sort of pushing it as that sort of like, hey, first time seeing our game, like
across all like outlets. Like this is the big debut. Like people were tweeting like the day prior to the thing. Can't wait to see the debut footage tomorrow.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, I thought I watched the wrong video after I first watched it. I really did. Like I was like, well, that can't be the like first time game. Like there's a longer version or something that, well, hopefully not too much longer, but there's another version that has more gameplay in it. But no.
Well, let's hope. And being
E3,
honest, and just to put a note on it, a lot of times, someone like Sony will limit media outlets and say you could only show clips for 5 seconds at a time or 10 seconds at a time. I mean, they give
you can
rules
only
like that.
Talk about your personal relationships with other developers in the video. That's all we're letting you do.
But here's to hoping that we'll see more and that it'll be promising, and that we'll actually know what this game is sooner rather than later before it ships.
I mean, we still have a while. We still have E3 in between now and when it's released. I'm sure we're going to see lots and lots more from the game. And I will say, the one thing I think all of us will agree, like the little bit they do show of the in-game engine running,
looks great.
It does look great. So I mean, hopefully the gameplay will follow.
Yes.
All right. So something else that there's been a lot of talk about, just how good it looks depending on the platform you're on, is the upcoming Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes. Brent, what's all the talk about these days?
You are now entering a fanboy zone. Just saying.
Yeah, there's really no way.
It's fanboyism when you're talking about facts. Come on.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, that's what fanboyism is. Fanboy is you saying a fact and somebody screaming in your face that you're a hater.
Yes.
For saying that fact. That's kind of
that's
what they do. So anyway, the point is though that we found out about one of the titles that's coming to both PS4 and Xbox One is Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes. Mm-hmm. And there is a rather distinct difference in how that game is going to look and I suppose feel between those two systems. In this case, on the Xbox One, we know that Ground Zeroes is going to be running at 720p and 60 frames a second, whereas on the PlayStation 4, it's going to be running at 1080p and 60 frames per second. And they've actually set up a comparison page where you can see the technical specs of how the game, like what resolution and frame rate it's going to run at, depending on what system you've got. There's screenshots, there's like video stuff that you can compare. Going back to the past generation systems, the 360 and the PlayStation 3, it's running 720p 30 frames a second on those consoles.
And internally scaled though too, so it usually means that it's going to be slightly less.
It's rendering at lower than 720 and then being scaled.
Whereas the other two, Xbox One and PS4, will be native 720 and 1080.
That's correct. That's totally fine. But the point, though, is that I think that this has kind of reignited a bit of the fanboy war, in the sense that we are seeing, just a few months into the release of those consoles, we're seeing a third-party game coming out that shows a marked difference in how it's going to play across those two consoles. And so I think that this has got a lot of people, and again, not making a judgment call, but it's just got a lot of people asking the question, well, gee, if the differences are already kind of showing up this early now, how disparate is it going to be a year or two from now?
Yeah.
And like people on the Sony side, would say, well, the Sony's the one to get. It's more future proof. The Xbox One is less powerful in hardware, and it's only gonna look worse as time goes on. And the PlayStation's only gonna look better. People on the Xbox One side say, well, it's all about optimization, and third-party devs don't have the experience with the hardware yet to really know how to use it. And in time, they're gonna optimize it, and it's gonna look even better. Yeah. Of course, that's going to happen on the PlayStation 4 as well. But the bottom line is that we are seeing, aside from just the abstract, aside from looking at the numbers on the page between the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, which everybody looks at and say it definitely looks like the PlayStation 4 has got a bit of an edge in the numbers. We're now kind of seeing that realized in a video game coming out for both consoles.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about this? Do you guys think that this is anything that Microsoft needs to be concerned about?
Yes and no. I mean, I personally am starting to regret my decision to carry home my free Xbox One a little bit at this point, whereas I could have carried home a free PlayStation 4. I'm just joking.
You mean you had the choice?
No, I didn't have the choice. I'm just teasing. No. I don't know.
You son of a bitch!
I think a lot of this stuff is how much of it do you really think influences purchasing decisions out there? I mean, like, what is the percentage of audience that's going to analyze this stuff and then say, I'm going to go out and buy a PS4 instead of an Xbox One? It's
honestly, I'm the one person that this sort of stuff really does speak to. Like, I really do get caught up in things like this because I do think that there is a pretty big difference, but it's also kind of thing where I have both systems, so it's like, well, okay, I'm going to buy it on this platform because it's better, but if I only had the option of having one or the other, it's going to come down to the exclusive games, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And it's kind of one of those things where, now, if it was a difference of the game was running like 720p and 30 frames per second, or was like some gulf between the two versions. The fact is, in reality, on a big screen, even on a big screen TV, 720p still looks pretty darn good. Sometimes even like something like the Call of Duty Ghosts that came out back around Christmas, or at the release of the systems, it ran at 720 on the Xbox and 1080 on the PS4, but it ran at a more reliable frame rate on the Xbox One. So it's kind of one of those things where you could even say like, okay, well, they made the choice to go the higher resolution, but then they also gave up a little bit of just raw performance to get there. So, it'll really kind of come down to, I think, this isn't going to be the game that sells the system. Something like a Titanfall is a game that I think will sell you on a system. And if you decide to buy that system that has Titanfall on it, well, then you're going to go ahead and buy that, Ground Zeroes on the platform you have.
Sure.
So in honesty, I don't think that it's, as much as I do think that it is kind of a sign that, like, look, we're starting off this generation at 720p on this console. It does worry me a little bit for the longevity of it down the road. Not saying that that's just awful and unplayable, but it does sort of kind of make me think, like, look, they're already struggling to hit like the resolution of almost every single TV that's out there these days. Yeah. And where there is optimization, there's all kinds of things they can do, but usually that doesn't mean like they're just magically going to be able to start making the games run at that high frame resolution with all the effects. They usually have to give up something.
I wish I could have seen the screenshots between the same screenshot.
Yeah, they made it. It was very interesting. They only compared PS3 and PS4 direct screenshots and Xbox 360, Xbox One direct shot. They never had two that you could directly compare.
Right, like the PS4.
It should have been the same
Xbox
screenshot all four systems.
Well, I think that was I almost think that was intentional. Yeah, so as not to inflate anybody or infuse anybody too much.
Got very political there.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't want anybody to feel like their console is not the best it can be.
Not like within like 2 seconds of the game being available, somebody else is not going to do that very thing, and everybody will see it.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, I don't know. I sort of think. What do you think, Brent? Do you think it's that big a deal?
No, I don't think. If this were a different game, maybe it would matter more, but I don't perceive Ground Zeroes as being like a system seller, and therefore I don't really feel as though people are going to... Like, I don't think this is going to stop anybody in their tracks and go, wait a second, Ground Zeroes was the reason I bought a next-gen console, and you're saying that my next-gen console can't run it at full 1080p resolution? Maybe I need to think about getting rid of this and getting a different... I don't think anybody is having that reaction to this.
Yeah.
What if it was a AAA? Like the reason by would it?
I think that would be different. Ghost is a good example. If Ghost had come out and had run 1080p, 60 frames a second, rock solid on the PlayStation 4, and had been like 720p and a shaky 60 frame on the Xbox One, to me, that's a big enough title that might have swayed people. That might have had people looking at it and saying, "Gee, if day one the difference is this, where's it going to be a year from now when the next Call of Duty comes out? Maybe I need to rethink my purchase."
And Battlefield was kind of that way, and it kind of was. Like, I do know some people that went PS4 because
Battlefield was equal opportunity. It was broken across all platforms equally.
But I mean, it ran.
I don't actually know that.
Significantly smoother on the PS4. I mean, when it ran,
Yeah, when it did.
It ran.
Yeah. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Ground Zeroes is when is it coming out? It's only what?
It's in the spring, right? I can't remember the exact date.
It's just right around the corner. So
no, I think it's just a couple months. But anyway, just to finish the one thing I was going to say, I think the people who already have their Xbox Ones and PlayStation 4s, they've already made that decision. For everybody who talked about, what, I'm going to wait a year. Like, I'm going to get one next year. I'm going to wait for, like the second iteration of the hardware to get manufactured, the bugs to get worked out. I'm going to wait for the games, to actually come out and have a decent catalog. I'll buy mine next Christmas. Yeah. For those people, I think they're watching this situation very carefully.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is interesting, though, because like at that point, Metal Gear Solid 5 will probably be coming out and nobody will be caring about Ground Zeroes, but I'm sure the tech will kind of carry over. So
yeah.
Anyway, interesting story. A less interesting story,
by far.
I think more interesting, actually.
I know. I'm giving it a hard time.
But you're wrong.
So we had the announcement. We had the announcement trailer for Chroma, which is a music-based first-person shooter.
Yes.
Coming out from Harmonix. DK, you want to tell us a little bit about it? Tell us all the details we learned today about it.
That shouldn't take long.
The makers of Rock Band and Dance Central are taking a completely different approach to their next game. It is a first-person shooter, and it's called Chroma. as you mentioned. It's a free-to-play first-person multiplayer shooter powered by Unreal, and it's going to be developed with the Counter-Strike Global Offensive team Hidden Path to deliver the following things: music-driven FPS gameplay. It says that Chroma is going to feature innovative first-person shooter mechanics that tie the game's soundtrack directly to combat, traversal, and more. They say music is your weapon. You have an opportunity to band together. Your teammates are your band members, apparently. Conquer shifting terrain, and it's free to play, but not play to win. The trailer was interesting that we saw from this game. It really comes. I mean, it was. I mean, because you don't really know what they're doing with this, and I think we have to kind of. I give them the benefit of the doubt. They know what they're doing in the music space, but it's really interesting. Do they know what they're doing in the shooter space?
Yeah,
I don't know. It remains to be seen. And I also wonder how long that mechanic can hold up. Like you think about playing a shooter like.
I'm not sure it can hold up until the release of the game.
Yeah, like Titanfall or Borderlands or Call of Duty or whatever, and it's like there's a lot of elements that make a shooter a good shooter, and I don't know how big the audience is for some people that feel they need to be kind of, and maybe they don't do this, but I would think that this mechanic kind of makes you subjected to, there's just less freedom within the gameplay. Like you have to be tied to that, and that can be fun, but I really just have to play it, to be honest with you.
Like you can't actually pull the trigger on your weapon until
when you want, until you hear
the next
the beat.
downbeat.
Right, exactly.
Unless it's jazz fusion and you're doing some sort of syncopated thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Neil Peart would kick butt at this game, but I don't know. We'll just have to see if there's freedom, if they're considering that. It says from deep wobbling bass to the crunch of an electric guitar, crushing metal drums to poppy synths. Choose a weapon loadout that reflects your musical tastes and a personal style, and take your sounds into battle.
I just don't. I mean, like, what does that even mean? Like,
it means I'm gonna get friggin' high and play.
That
this
means
thing.
Like, okay, I'm gonna fucking put on my iPod while I go shoot some people.
This will be like the HR Puffin stuff of the 21st century. This game right here.
Oh, jeez.
It could be awesome. It could be awesome. I don't know.
But we don't know, and the reason we don't know is because they're not telling us jack shit. This trailer is stacked. It's chock full of hyperbole and things like
and it's
coming
from the people.
Signal. Music is your weapon. Sound is your arsenal. For glory, for survival. I'm like, this sounds like, honestly, this sounds like the tagline to a terrible 80s cartoon that got canceled because its toy line was bullshit.
You're right.
Even worse is the fact that I think that what's going on here is basically the rock band Guitar Hero craze has gone. That fad lived and died. It's over now. And so you've got a whole bunch of people that have a whole bunch of tech and know-how when it comes to music-based games, and they got nowhere to apply that skill set. And so they're trying desperately to like find something new. And they're like, what's popular in video games? Oh, I know, first-person shooters. We'll mix first-person shooters with music games. This doesn't seem desperate. There's nothing about this that seems interesting to me whatsoever. Really? I'm willing to be convinced if they want to show me some gameplay or something.
But you're definitely taking a glass half empty approach with this. I mean,
I'm taking a glass got fucking smashed by a sledgehammer approach to this. There is nothing here.
When they hand you a half-empty glass, it's
based on the media and information they have released, they have nothing.
I tell you,
that could change, but right now, I see nothing here.
The thing about the game, like, it's coming from Harmonix, the people that like sold you every single stupid song, under
you
the sun for $2 a pop or whatever it was. On their games, and now it's a free-to-play game. I would love to know
and how many hundreds of dollars worth of toy instruments.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, I'd love to know what their monetary, microtransactions like are going to be in the game, because that's what they're going for. And I don't know. To me, these are two things that just don't necessarily go well together. Now, I really am with Brent in the sense that, like, from the surface and from the trailer they're showing, like, it just does. There's nothing about it that sort of strikes me as like, oh, that just sounds awesome. It's like, that sounds weird. So I'll have to be sort of won over. And hey, I would love to be shown a trailer or get a demo or whatever and just be like, oh, you know what? I get it. I think
wrong. This is one of those games that they and if I fault them for anything, it's that this game seems like you have to really play it to understand it, and so conveying that in marketing and with an announcement is very difficult. And what you're saying is completely true. Like, the nature of how it was kind of presented doesn't leave you with much to kind of understand and kind of leaves you to have to hope that they can deliver. So I don't know if it could have been delivered in a different way, but I am giving them the benefit of the doubt, looking at this half full and hoping, because I don't mind rhythm games. I like some first person shooters, and I like the guys from Harmonix. I want to see something good come out of them. So I'm hoping that this one is something that I could sync up with.
The one thing about the game that I just don't, it seems to me a little bit like the story we were talking about with the Order 1886.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
They bring a trailer out, and it sort of doesn't move you forward in your sort of expectations for the game. Like, it just sort of like, oh, hey, we get new content, and then you kind of at the end like, did we see anything new? Like, you're just not sure.
I don't feel
and this
any
did different. Within that, you could at least get a little bit of a taste, and you kind of at least have an idea, I think, of what the game's going to be like. I have no idea what working rhythm musical kind of aspect into a shooter is going to look like. I can't fathom anything of that that's drastically different, unless it's just like really small aspects of a shooting game that are worked around that. Like, to me, if it's going to be some drastic meshing of the two, it's going to have to be a very, very different kind of game.
And I think that's the thing. Like, if it was a shooter that had some sync rhythm elements, that'd be one thing. But if it's
like, didn't some game what was it? Wasn't there a game that did something like that? Like, you had sort of like when you went up to
the fact that you can't remember the name of it says a lot.
Well, no, but it was like Brink or something like that. Like, there's a game that did something, and it was different, and some people did like it, but
trust me. No, but I know what you mean. But anyway, in the description, there's such a tying of the things by talking about drums and your band is your team, and there's so much synergy between the worlds of music and first person shooter that I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like it's more than just a small aspect of a shooting game. It seems like there's a big mesh between the two, and like I said, I am kind of, and I think we're actually all kind of on the same page. You're slightly more optimistic about it, we're slightly less so, but I mean, we're both of the point that, like, hey, look, if it comes out and it looks awesome, then we're all on board.
Strikes a chord.
So, yep, strikes a chord. All right, guys. Well, we are here in the main topic this week, and we want to talk a little bit about a subject matter that was actually brought up on the faves list page, and it kind of brought up a situation that we've talked about aspects of this before, but we really wanted to kind of get into it today. The difference between like having these single solo game playing experiences versus some of these only multiplayer experiences we're seeing. We're seeing games like the beta for Titanfall just dropped. Of course, that's a huge AAA title that's multiplayer only. But we've got a lot of games coming out, a lot of AAA titles coming out here lately that are kind of making a point to saying that they are going to be single player only, and it's sort of interesting to see where that's taking us. Brent, you want to kind of tell us about some of the stories, some of the games that we can kind of look forward to playing by ourselves?
Absolutely, and it's interesting to revisit this topic because we have talked about this before in the past, but of course now we are in a new console generation, and there are all kinds of new ideas and new sensibilities that are coming into gaming right now, and it's fascinating to reevaluate this topic right now and to kind of look at the timeliness of the subject, given the fact that we have kind of come from a generation where we started last time, and we had conversations about this. I think, the Uncharted 2 multiplayer, is famously, one of the examples I said, like, what the fuck does this game series need with multiplayer? Right. And then, I actually played it and like, oh, that actually really kicks a lot of ass. But it seemed as though in the last generation, there was this huge push for multiplayer. And, we talked about stories. We talked about games where we felt like multiplayer was just being tacked on. It's like, oh, you got to have multiplayer because that's a bullet point that the box needs to have in order for it to sell on the shelves in retail stores everywhere. Right. And it's fascinating to now kind of look at that situation and say, well, yeah, it does seem like multiplayer got really pervasive. But all of a sudden, we're kind of seeing we're seeing devs kind of like taking a step back from that a little bit. And it seems like, being in this new console generation, for whatever reason, has given people a little bit of freedom, or at least, given them the ability to step back and say, well, maybe we don't really need multiplayer. And, you've got things like Infamous, the Order that we talked about just a few minutes ago, Shadow of Mordor, where I think, I made some observation about this.
Yeah.
We had a news story a couple weeks ago, and it was like, it's news now that a game is single player only?
Yeah.
But then on the other side of the coin, there's tons of things, like Titanfall as an example, that are really, really pushing for that multiplayer experience and finding ways of doing that that are kind of interesting. We were talking about Evolve last week. They the co-op / competitive multiplayer game.
Yeah.
So I think that this is the question. This is the question to talk about today. What do you think, given what we've kind of gone through in the last console generation and what we kind of see as the promise for this console generation?
Yeah.
What do you guys think about games that are going to go one way or the other? Do you think that we're going to continue to see games that are trying to do both, or do you think that we're seeing the beginning of kind of a split where we're going to see a lot more games just doing one or the other rather than trying to be everything to everybody?
Yeah. I think the latter, and here's why. In the last console generation with the Xbox 360, PS4, we had a connected community that we didn't have prior to those platforms. And as a result, the rise of multiplayer gaming was something that people saw the vast potential in. The games that did it really well on a mass level, games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, showed the potential promise of what it means to have multiplayer and how long you can keep that brand front and center and that disc in the tray, which is what all developers are striving for.
Sure.
However, towards the end of the life cycle of those platforms, we started to see big brands that already had the awareness and had the audience, things like Uncharted, things like Mass Effect, start to say, well, we need a multiplayer component too. And then it started to feel, as we recalled on earlier episodes of this show back in the day, that everyone was kind of forcing it in. But what we ended up with was these kind of lukewarm experiences for some better than others. I think Mass Effect fans would say there was no need to really include Mass Effect multiplayer in Mass Effect 3. It didn't really. Nobody to this day is like, oh man, I got to get back on that Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. It's just something that was there, and I think that the industry needed time to experiment with it, and the experiment proved a result, and that result is that it's better to pursue one or the other rather than to do both. And we're seeing that now. It's interesting to me that games like Titanfall are saying, you know what, screw single player. We don't need single player. We're just going to do multiplayer. And
right.
If that's our focus and we're going to deliver and we're going to do it well, and that's what we're going to be. Meanwhile, you've got these games, Infamous, The Order, Shadow of Mordor, saying we are going to focus on single player. And I think that as we're in this...
And then you've got games like Destiny that are... somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere
in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle, but they kind of know what they're doing. And I think the idea here is that developers are better served to decide what they're doing and do it well, as opposed to try to just be all things to all people. And I, for one, love single player experiences probably a lot more than multiplayer experiences. But even with the Titanfall beta, I can't wait to buy Titanfall when it comes out. That's my. There's no need for that game, in my opinion, to have a single player. Now they might do something interesting down the road and maybe release something, a side thing or whatever. But I mean, I like the idea of you got Thief coming out, single player only game, and Titanfall multiplayer only, and it's like I'm very much looking forward to both of those experiences for very different things, and I'm happy with that.
I do agree, and I think you really kind of hit on the point of it. It's what's best for the game. Instead of trying to sort of spread yourself too thin and trying to bring in aspects of a lot of different things, it's like, look, focus on what the true experience is about. And I think a lot of people would argue that some of the kind of the competitive shooters, like your Call of Duties and things like that, like a lot of times, and Battlefield was another one that has both aspects. Well, they I think looked at the numbers and really kind of started to see that a lot of people, a huge percentage of people buying their games, either very little or did not play at all the single player aspect of their game.
Right.
And so they're like, well, look, so we're putting because I'm sure they put tons of resources behind that. I mean, it's, all the aspects that go behind a single player, it's not just like, oh, well, all we have to do is we've already got the engine, we've already got everything done. We just throw together a story. I mean, there's huge elements that go into creating that single player aspect. If they could put those resources into making the part of the game that the majority of their fans are playing, well, then why not do that? Or
just not even spend that money. And just
exactly, not even spend that money and have it be a more profitable game. I don't think that that's a bad idea at all. I do think that there are going to be, and exact same way with the single player aspect, you focus on making that story really, really good. And then instead of being like, oh, and since we've already got all this, let's try to make it multiplayer. Sometimes that works. I don't think that it's necessarily just a bad experience all across the board whenever you try to do that. But I do think that it is somewhat, would we have been better off spending those resources somewhere else? I do think with something like Titanfall, to me, is sort of interesting that I think that they did the exact right thing to start off with the series, but I definitely think that this is a series that could see a later single-player maybe add-on or a one-off kind of game, because I do think that it has kind of a cool world that you could kind of be in, and if they wanted to make that more, and they've talked about having campaign aspects in the game, and I will really be kind of interested to see what that ends up being, because I really sort of feel like, I don't know, I feel like it'll be sort of, I don't really think that you will feel like you're playing a campaign within a multiplayer game. I think you'll just feel like you're playing a multiplayer game with some little aspect of it that feels slightly that direction. But I think that they could make that way. The same way that I think that they could take, after they have completed it, like they finish, let's say Thief, just as the example you threw out there. Let's say they finish the game, they're done with it, they get a great story out, everybody's really happy with it, and then they're like, look, instead of maybe doing another DLC storyline, what if we took our resources here and now built it into a multiplayer, aspect? That, maybe for that particular game, maybe not. But I'm just saying to finish what you're doing first, then kind of look at, something to do with it afterwards. Then you can really kind of say, okay, well, you know what? We really want to do another story. Okay, do another single player story. Well, we really want to maybe take this another direction, go multiplayer with it. Okay, do that. But don't sort of half-ass it the way some. I mean, when I say half-ass, not say that they don't put effort into it, but I don't think that it gets the full attention.
Some are just more successful.
I definitely want Brent's opinion, but just real fast. I think the idea of multiplayer is changing. Like, it doesn't need to have the competitive multiplayer stuff. Like, Dishonored did really cool stuff with, like, time trials and even a game like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. It's like how fast, upload to the server your best time and compete with your friends. Like, that is quote unquote
that asynchronous kind of multiplayer
that's
gameplay.
Great, and that could fit in, and I could see that,
even
extending.
Like Forza had the whole what was the racing against the sort of
like your friend's ghost car.
Yeah, but it was like it wasn't just their ghost file. They actually raced like you raced.
Yeah, they're like,
but when you weren't on there. Yeah, it actually was pretty cool.
And I could see that being something that goes into games that have a single player focus. But anyway, sorry. So Brent, what do you think?
I think that honestly, as we talk about this more, and as I just sit here and kind of think about it, I do kind of think that for the last generation, which was the first kind of fully connected console generation, where you had online services and online multiplayer was a consequence of having those connected consoles.
Yeah.
Not that the prior Xbox wasn't connected, but obviously all of that stuff really came into the mainstream in the last generation.
Right.
I think that, in a way, although we kind of say it almost as a joke, but I really do think that in a way multiplayer was just a bullet point for the last generation. It was like, we have an online connected console. We need to remind people of that fact. We need to remind people that that you can do all this stuff with it, and multiplayer is the way that we do that. People have a console connected to the internet. They expect to be able to play online multiplayer, and it's like anything, whether it's it's like a popular kind of movement in music that starts utilizing new instruments or old instruments in new ways, or whether it's some sort of technique that's being popularized in action films, like like playing with the shutter speed and shaking the camera, like those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Basically, when those things are introduced, everybody kind of jumps on them and starts using them because it's new and people want to get a piece of it. And then in time, that kind of smooths out, and people start only really using them when they're appropriate. They say, okay, well, yeah, but like this can be overused, and it really doesn't work all that great.
Exactly.
But if you season whatever you're working on with this component, if you just use it where it's appropriate to do so, that's when it can really shine, and it can really enhance something. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. I think what we're seeing multiplayer we're kind of seeing like that approach to it smoothing out, and people kind of saying, all right, not every game needs to have multiplayer, but I can think of an idea for a game that would only be multiplayer that'd be really cool if we did X, Y, and Z. And I think that's kind of what's happening. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that ultimately developers need to be focused on, let's figure out a really innovative, really unique, and fantastic gameplay experience that we can present. And if it's multiplayer or if it's single player, it doesn't really matter. It's just about delivering the best thing that they can.
Totally.
And I feel like that's what we're seeing, and that's really, really, I think, a good step.
Yeah.
All right, guys, well, we are coming up near the end of this week's Skirmish, but first, we have our Battle Cries of the week, and my Battle Cry it goes to something that I thought was just a little interesting. First off, it starts with the fact that the new iteration of the game Strider drops today. Actually,
Strider? I don't even know her.
So it'll be out by the time that you're listening to this, and I haven't got a chance to play it just yet, but I do think it looks really cool. I'm kind of excited about picking it up. But the story that I want to talk about, it's a little different. It's the story that kind of has gotten out there, and it's not really been big news, probably for good reason in some cases. But the fact is that certain people were actually able to download the Strider game for the Xbox 360 a little early and for free.
Okay.
And a lot of people kind of heard about this, and they sort of like the internet is, people want to get in on that and get it going. And then there's a lot of people that say well, wait a minute, if you do that, that's breaking some rules or whatever. Well, the fact is that somehow the game got out, and if you had the game, if you had a friend on your friends list that had the game, by you looking at them and seeing oh, hey, they're playing Strider, that's really cool. Just seeing that, you can click on the game to say hey, I like that game, I want to try it too. And it would take you to the download page on Xbox Live, and it would let you download it for free. There was no hacking involved. There was no real weird you had to go around a certain way and log in with some Australian Xbox Live account, and
Switch the controllers to controller port 4.
Yeah, I mean, really, it was not like anything where you really had to do something shady to get around to it. It was just a loophole in the system. The game shouldn't have been out. Somehow, some people got it. A lot of times, a lot of the people that actually had it were reviewers that just had gotten the game to do reviews on and things like that. But if those people were on your friends list and you saw them playing, you naturally you just kind of be like, oh, is that out? I thought it was out in a couple days. Cool, I'm just going to check it out. And you'd go to that page, and
it's free. Sure.
And so a lot of people, the story I want to talk about just real quick is the fact that a lot of people were saying don't do it, because that's you're breaking the rules of Xbox Live, and they'll ban your account. And the fact is that from just your own kind of moral standards, I would agree that I do think that if you're obviously getting a game for free, that you should probably know that there is something not so legit with that. But I also kind of have a problem with the fact that, look, if they screw up and put a game out that you don't have to actively do something shady to get around to do.
It's not your fault, yeah.
I kind of, that's where I sort of come down on it. And nobody has been banned for doing this particular one, but there have been stories of people using accounts for the game is free in another region, so they created an account in that other region to download a game and stuff like that. And that is you've got to take extra steps to sort of go around.
Right.
I think there's a little bit of a different situation, but even then, it does kind of make you wonder why they let things like this go on. But it just speaks to me the fact that I do get a little frustrated when we are in a world now where these companies have they're like, look, we screwed up, but you shouldn't have taken advantage of that screw up.
Right.
So, anyway,
there's free games on all these platforms now too, so it could be super confusing,
Exactly. No, that's the exact story. And a lot of times people are just like, hey, I was going to get it anyway. I'll go ahead and buy now, and it goes ahead and goes through. Hey, I'm expecting to pay $15, buy now, and you don't really pay attention to the store. Now, I mean, some people say right, that's what you do. Legitimately, I was planning on buying this game. If I had seen that, I probably would have just clicked through, because I was just expecting to pay it anyway. So anyway, I'd just be interested to see what you guys think, to see if you guys think that these people took advantage of it are just dirty thieves, or if they're just taking advantage of a loophole that shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like Microsoft ever took advantage of any loopholes.
Absolutely. All right, Brent.
Or holes in general.
Brent, what is your battle cry this week?
My battle cry this week goes out to just a little hint of news about FTL Advanced Edition, which is the free expansion coming to PC, Mac, and Linux sometime this year, and it's also going to be the debut of FTL on iPad, which I am enormously excited about. I think FTL is going to be an amazing iPad game. It's an amazing game already that I've played on PC quite a bit, and I really, really dig the game. So the Advanced Edition is going to add a bunch of things to the existing game, and we've got a little bit of information on those. We found out that one of the things you're going to be able to have on your ship now is a clone bay, where you can simply grow new copies of your recently departed crew members, unless the cloning process gets interrupted, in which case they're gone forever. But that's one aspect we found out about. There's also going to be hacking drones that will allow you to target specific subsystems of your enemy ships, and as an example, you can target their shields and drop their shields, and then you can do massive damage on their vessels. But with all that news, which is really, really cool, the one thing that I still would really like to have is the release date, which we don't have right now. Originally I thought we were going to have the game by now. I think originally, for whatever reason, whether this was just my perception or whether they actually said something to this effect, it was going to be January or something. I thought it was going to be very, very shortly after the first of the year. Still not here yet. Hopefully not going to wait too much longer.
Yeah.
But it was nice to just kind of get reminded that it's still out there, it's still coming, and I'm still very, very excited for FTL Advanced Edition.
Yeah, and I do have a little bit of inside information on this. In addition to the clone bay, the Advanced Edition is also going to include a Michael bay, in which your character politely excuses himself from the ship.
He's like acting captain. Things get kind of rough.
I'm sorry.
he just walks off. He's just like, no, I'm done.
All right.
If only he could take that step with the Transformers series.
There's no prompter, so I'm leaving the ship.
That's right.
All right, DK, what is your battle cry this week, buddy?
I'm going to keep it quick because we're running out of time. It goes out to Nintendo, and my battle cry specifically has to deal with the Nintendo Directs. We had our first Nintendo Direct of 2014, and these things are quickly becoming bad. You mentioned this on Twitter.
Let's be honest, they're not quickly becoming bad. They're taking their sweet ass time becoming bad.
Here's the deal. When they said we're going to back off of the E3 thing a little bit, we're going to back off of this stuff, we want to have this innovative thing called Nintendo Direct where we directly communicate with our fans, and I get it, but it's devolving into this minute, and here's this really weird game that's coming out. We're going to talk about it for 5 minutes, and it's that is all fine, and all of that is justified if you have a really big buzzworthy headline associated with each and every one of these things. And Nintendo, as much they're not flying high right now and on everybody's good side where they can get away with stuff. And the more they put themselves out there, the more that they are, being a detriment to their brand. So if they don't do this right, so they really, Nintendo, please hear me, really focus on what you're doing with the Nintendo Directs. Either do them big time or don't do them at all. When you were saying this is our first one of 2014, we want to see big things. We want to hear announcements. And you could show us a glimpse of the new Zelda game or whatever, and then everything else is justified. But don't get everyone's attention and get me as somebody who's a media personality to tell everyone about this, and then have it be just about Little Mac being in Super Smash Brothers. So anyway,
leave that shit for Ready at Dawn in the Order 1886.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope they pull it together. There you go.
Yeah,
time for a member battle cry.
I absolutely wholeheartedly back you on that, because to be honest with you, I was, when I first saw you had this in your list to talk about, I was like, damn it, because I really wanted to go into it too. You're exactly right. They have, I think they're doing damage to Nintendo with these rather than helping themselves.
Right.
But anyway, let's move along to our member battle cry, which of course last week our main topic we talked a little bit about whether it's time to get a Vita yet or not. A lot of people, of course, have already taken up the Vita, but there's a lot of people that haven't yet. And with the announcement of the new bundle, it's kind of a good time to talk about it. So we have a comment from Patch, who says, I'm starting to gain interest in the Vita for the reasons you guys mentioned, but even more so for the recent developments in the Vita exclusives library and the PS4/PS Vita cross-platform functionality. Although I have enjoyed both Borderlands and God of War prior to the Vita, I would still like to pick up one to play the increasingly popular and critically acclaimed games like Tearaway, as well as interesting exclusives such as Persona 4 The Golden, and the recent arcade shooter TXK, and somber RPGs like Danganronpa. I can never pronounce that game right. Trigger Happy Havoc, which just came out. Add to that the PS4 cross-platform features, the wonderful PlayStation Plus model, and a powerful handheld experience, and you will find a great piece of hardware that finally is hitting its stride. I find it hard not to own one soon. Mm-hmm. So I think he's got a good point. I mean, if you haven't already picked one up,
more people are seeing the light. Yeah.
DK, I think you're finally sort of on board, right? I think you said you were picking up the Borderlands 2 bundle, right?
Yep, I'm gonna do it. I'm excited.
Sweet.
So I think Sony's really finally coming to its own with the Vita. So hopefully we'll just continue to see more great games for it and all the things that Patch mentioned there.
Yeah, so it's about time for them to bring out a new model just as soon as they got one. All right, so guys, that is going to do it for this week's Skirmish. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here this week, and please join us once again next week when we will be mercilessly cleaving the fat from the gaming stories of the day. For Brent Adams and Daniel Kaiser, I'm your host, Tony Grice, and remember, cry havoc, and please, Nintendo, just for the love of God, just do something. Make them shorter, show more information. For the love of God, don't cover the same game in like 4 of your Nintendo Directs and just show one little tiny tidbit of information. Like all of the information they have released about Super Smash Brothers for the Wii U, all of that information would barely make enough information for one legitimate release.
Yep.
Right?
Totally.
I mean, am I crazy?
No.
I mean, you're crazy, but
Yes.
you're still right.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I'll take that.